Well, hello, everyone, and thank you again for joining us on the podcast. We have quite an interesting specialized topic today for anyone that might be new to procurement, but more specifically, new to construction procurement, because it's its own animal, it's its own bear. And at TIPS, we have a specific division that's called TIPS Construction. And we brought in two of our subject matter experts today, Gene Hawk and Brandon Williams. Gene, you want to introduce yourself first?
My name is Gene Hawk. My role at TIPS Construction Compliance is to help members and vendors properly use job order contracting, review submissions, provide guidance on scope development, verify pricing methodology, and ensure alignment with awarded contracts.
Yeah. Well, thank you for being here, Gene. And we've also got in similar capacity, Brandon Williams. Brandon, you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'm Brandon Williams. I work for TIPS Construction Compliance Department. I assist Gene in all the matters of the construction portion of the procurement process.
Well, welcome to the podcast, guys. Really thankful that you guys would take out an hour of your day or so to help explain maybe some beginner level introduction to construction and what TIPS can do to help. But you tied into it perfectly, Gene, because in your own description of what you're doing, you mentioned something that I think would benefit to just let's define something as a baseline. Okay. You mentioned JOC, right? Or job order contracting. So, Gene, what exactly is job order contracting and how does that pertain to our TIPS contracts?
JOC is an acronym for job order contracting. You're correct on that. In our world, that is an indefinite delivery, indefinite quantity procurement method that allows multiple projects to be completed under one competitively awarded contract. Instead of bidding each item out individually for each project, and the pricing is developed using national recognized cost data such as RS Means, BNI, or Xactimate. These cost books are organized using the CSI format, which is the 34 construction divisions. And this allows a JOC to cover a wide range of facility and construction work, including demolition, concrete, masonry, carpentry, roofing, all your different divisions of construction. And because the pricing exists across all 34 divisions, members can use those JOC contracts for any specific construction, remodel, renovation, or addition, small construction type projects they might want to do.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, in layman's terms, really, job order contracting utilizes a set price book. You mentioned several of them, right? RS Means, BNI, Xactimate. There's others out there. And it basically takes what should a construction project cost in your area and in that specific, like you said, division of asphalt or roofing or you name it, right? And it takes that and it tells the public through the public dollar, right? What should that project cost based on scope, based on engineering, based on materials? It spits out something that says would be a fair price to receive from that vendor, right? So, that's great. That's a great jumping off.
Let me touch on the city cost index. That is all these books are derived from a national average, and that city cost index is applied for the region or city or county that they're in to. And what that does, that accounts for the correct labor rates, cost of materials in your specific area. I mean, you wouldn't want to pay in a small rural community in South Dakota the same price they pay in California. You wouldn't want to do that. So that's what the purpose of that city cost index is for, is to adjust those rates so it creates a fair pricing tool for everyone across the nation.
Absolutely. And I mean, we're getting ahead of ourselves now, but up to and including prevailing wage states too. Every state's got its own needs or guidelines on how to pay labor, and these cost indexes are ready to do that too. So yeah. But no. So Brandon, what does kind of start to finish? What does a typical project look like when using a TIPS JOC contract? right? Just high level here.
So basically, when we receive a proposal from the member or the vendor, if the vendor wants to get a pre-approval, uh, basically what we do on that is we take the actual RS means and we plug it in and verify each line item to make sure that they're, that they are the pricing in the book is accurate. We take all that information, total it all up, and make sure that that they're doing a HVAC job. They're not, or they're doing a concrete job. They're not adding HVAC to that project. Just kind of those type things where you make sure everything's in line, and you verify the pricing again, and make sure that the coefficients are applied to the actual the coefficients based off of the contract are applied to the end result of the RS means, along with that city cost index as Gene had mentioned.
Right. Yeah. And just playing the advocate here for anyone that's listening, that's brand new, that's using this as a resource, right? So the tips is already gone out to competitively sealed bid based off that to go and say, okay, we're going to guarantee X% discount or what have you for each vendor to then be scored, evaluated, and awarded. And that's all on record. And that is, available at the vendor profiles page. And that gets tied into our price books with a coefficient, right?
Yeah, so we have
That's
what we have for that is we have like you said, each contract, each job contract, when they do the seal bid, they bid a regular hours coefficient, after hours coefficient, and then a cost plus for a cost
yeah.
markup for anything that's not in the book, a non-priced item. So we make sure that those are applied correctly to that RS means estimate or BNI or Xactimate.
Yeah. You said non-pre-price markup, right? So y- how many line items are typically in a standard, JOC quote? I'm just asking because that's something we see a lot of. And how much of a breakdown does the agency actually get when they use one of these price books? It
God,
varies. I mean,
there's
Brandon, you can
multiple
just
line
yeah.
items. I mean,
Yeah.
sometimes we have 4 or 5 page ones, and sometimes we have 1 page. We've had them up to 40 pages before that are,
Oh yeah.
line item after line item. And just really depends on how they build their estimate out, how they price it out to
Mhm.
the member as to how they're put into the RS means. Uh, when you add multiple line items of each nut and bolt, then it gets a little bit, time consuming, but it is part of the project.
Oh yeah. Yeah, and that's all happening, basically, um, at the vendor level of communication between the public agency and what vendor they're working at. And typically, they either have an in-house estimator that makes those RS means or Xactimate quotes or you name it, whatever they're using, and then they present that to you, the agency, and then that copy of that RS means quote comes in, right? So, Gene, let me throw this one back at you, right? So once all that takes place and a project is kind of deemed fit, what should both sides be thinking about when they're completing this, moving towards what we'll call like a price verification, like when they're thinking scope of work, when they're thinking what type of line items to include, what you recommend on both sides of that table, Gene?
Well, of course, I have a little background in construction myself. So historically, if I were in a vendor position that was doing this, first thing I would do be visit the job site where the work is going to
Yeah,
take place. I would want a member representative there with me to us to review and talk about the scope of work, look at all conditions that might affect that scope of work, any existing conditions might have to deal with, anything
yeah,
that might be traffic related. If you're in a public school building, you might have to work around students or university the same way. So all those things that affect that, that would be my very first step in that, and make sure that myself and the owner agree on what the actual scope of work is going to be. So, and once we agree on that, then of course I would go back to my office and start preparing my proposal. Then I would go through the RS means, my takeoff estimate on the job, and then go back and prepare that RS means that Brandon was just discussing. That would be the first
yeah.
step with that. So,
Absolutely. I mean, there's your free advice of the day for the vendors, right? You you need to be the 3 steps of success, I guess, is communicate, and then communicate some more, right?
Yeah.
I've seen things go awry where it does take time to put some of these estimates together, depending on the size of the project, and where they got the elevation wrong on paper, or the grade or whatever. Oh, they had backtrack and go fix that and get an engineer involved or something like that. It's like, well, hey, back at square one. So, love the site visit, love the communication, and really, with every step of the way, give them a, okay, are we doing this, or are we doing this, or doing this and this, and that seems almost impeding. However, the time you take to stop and ask some questions and get things right based on how the agency may want it, it's going to save you time in the long run, right? So that's
Yeah.
go ahead.
They can't base their pricing on assumptions. So they
Oh
need
yeah,
clear data on what's supposed to happen, where it's going to happen, and who's going to do that. So that helps prevent problems later down the road. If they, like you say, communication, and
exactly.
documentation. So,
Oh yeah.
so
Well, that perfect line for that, because the next question I was going to ask Brandon is, okay, let's just assume they got everything right on the communication side, and we have this finalized quote, right? What TIPS does is we take that and make sure that all the scope of the project meets those line items, and everything that we're doing to do a price verification on behalf of the agencies using our contracts. Brandon, what exactly are we looking for when it comes to that compliance review piece on the tip side?
As far as what we're sending back, or as far as what we're looking at in.
When you're reviewing the line item estimate, what are those? What is the things that you're typically searching for? Obviously, the quote, but things like coefficient, things like
Yeah,
contract number.
we'll verify that, of course, the member's a member, and verify the contract numbers on there correctly. We'll take,
Yep.
the RS means and verify all of it. Make sure the city cost index or the project is being performed is
Mhm.
same as what's on the RS means. There's obviously the coefficients, as we've discussed earlier. Make sure that they're in there and reflected correctly. If they have
Yeah.
any non-priced items, we look for those items. We typically have those items in what we call Division 99. So if they're not in the price book, we'll have them to put those in a Division 99. And then on those particular items, we'll request an invoice cost on those items, and they'll use their non-pre-price to mark that up. So if they've got a 20% or 30%, then we'll mark that up accordingly, or allow them to mark it up accordingly. And just at the end of the day, make sure that their proposal is matching, what the RS means, and that everything is, in line, all the coefficients are applied correctly, and so on.
So just to tag on to that, Brandon, we send that back. We email it back to the agency, right? What type of record keeping, beyond just you got the email back, what do you recommend that they save probably for their records and any future audits that are coming? Because construction does one thing, and that's attract the audit, right?
Yeah,
So,
and so what they do is once they send the purchase order once we approve everything, we give direction in email on how to submit the purchase order. The purchase order is then submitted to the TIPS PO email. Once
yeah,
that's recorded, then that goes into and they get the purchase order. Then the member, they'll have in their member portal, and then the vendor will have it in their vendor portal as well for records.
awesome. That's great. No, and so back to Gene here. Um, a lot of times, we deal with this every day, so I'm just trying to keep it at a level where intro to construction works for most people, right? A lot of times, I'll get the question in the field, what does, aligning this quote with the TIPS contract or the contracted price mean? And how do I do that, right? So whether it's in the software or others, how do people make sure that, quote unquote, it aligns with their TIPS contract, which was bid out in previous time?
Michael, I would encourage everyone to refer back to specifications of that contract when they submitted their bid. That's in
Right.
the e-bid system, and that's in their contract, online in their contract. We do run across that from time to time where people may be trying to sell commodities to a construction contract or vice versa. So I would encourage in the first step to look back at the specification of that actual contract. We do try to encourage vendors and members to look at that and make sure, of course, that's up to them to select which one is appropriate for them to use. We try to lead them in the right direction. We're not going to push them, but we do try to lead them and help them if they're unsure or not which one to use. Typically, that comes more from the member side than it does the vendor side about which contract to use.
Right.
Some of the member entities are very versed in JOC contracts, and they specify those specifically. And then we have vendors that are not familiar with them, so then we have to send them in that direction too, to help them and educate them on what's required for that specific one.
Yeah, and the thing is, it's not just available in the eBid system. Once they are awarded a contract, because at the point that they're talking to a school district, they've already been an awarded vendor on tips. It's all publicly available on the website.
Sure.
So in the due diligence part of the website, you can go see the original solicitation and see that bid specifications, and that's talked a lot of it for us in boardrooms and lawyers' offices and you name it. Because I'll just pull up that paragraph and where TIPS is very intentional with its scope of work, and it says it shall include, but not limited to this, and
Sure.
proposals that include this don't bother, right? And so it tells you what is and what isn't the intent of our publication and of our bid and award, right? So, yeah, very powerful. And then obviously the back end of that is, does it match those coefficients that we've been talking about already? So, yeah, scope of work, intent of our contract, and those coefficients. So, Brandon, that's all fine and dandy, right? What happens when you find something and it has to get sent back, right? If there's something that doesn't line up with one of those, either the coefficient or the scope, or oftentimes it's an easy fix and no one's doing it maliciously. We'd like to believe, but that does happen. Maybe 1% of the time or something like that. What happens then? What can agencies expect, and what can those vendors expect?
Well, if we find the problem, when we see the problem, we'll typically reach out to the vendor and ask them to fix those issues.
Yeah.
If they, put in the wrong coefficient, or if they're in the wrong city, or if they're using a national cost index instead of that city cost index, a lot of times that'll really trigger a higher RS means estimate than it would if it was in a specific city. So we just reach out to them and have them. We work with them. That's Gene and I work. We educate with these people daily. On
Oh, yeah.
how to fix things, how to make this better for you, easier for you, what have you. So it's just typical communication for us back to the member or the vendor, either way, to fix those issues and to work through any problems that we might foresee or are working through.
Right. And I mean, as soon as they get it back to us, we just continue on down
Yeah, we'll just move
our
forward. Then
our
once
review.
they get those items corrected, we'll get it back and we'll move forward with the with the review or and then the processing of the order.
Absolutely. And all this procurement, all this, due diligence and cost of living indexes and all that, you got to remember this is all to protect the public dollar, right? That's the mission. So with all these steps taking place, that is our underlying goal, right? Depending on where you're at in the country, you're going to experience, up to a 3-year audit, up to a 5-year audit responsibility, up to 7. And we've seen it go out in some states up to 10 years, right? The reason we're talking about this and the reason that all this is taking place, and it may seem that we're being nitpicky, well, that's because, like I said before, large scale purchases are going to attract attention, and the auditing boards, it varies for municipalities and schools, but I'll just, that auditor, their job is to make sure that public funds got spent appropriately. we're doing everything we can ahead of time to meet those audit requirements, right? That should be the goal for every public purchase, not just purchases through a cooperative, right? But that's our frame of mind, that's our framework, and that's why all of this is happening. So, Gene, you can either elaborate on that or maybe share some real world experiences of what you've seen before. But can you maybe touch on what are those advantages and benefits when an agency is going through this to utilize the TIPS construction resources?
Well, I have several years in public procurement from public
Hmm.
entities myself as well, and so I'm very aware of what those member entities have to deal with on a day-to-day basis. Most of them are not staffed where they can create documents, bid documents, go out to bid, deal with all those things on their own. So that puts a cooperative uh, at the top of their list if they have that, because it saves them a lot of time, money, and two, with the procurement piece, that keeps them legal. I mean, that's one of the most important things to public entities. They have money that comes from all different places. And like you say, audit, if they get flagged or get in trouble, they might lose funding from a certain place next year or for 2 years or for 3 years
Right.
if they have a finding and an audit for them to do that. As far as from the vendor side, from tips, our procurement team side, that we do all those things for them, then they're valuable customers to both of us. That's how we both operate. But our job is to keep them legal and compliant. If we can't do
Yeah.
that, they don't need us, either one of us, the vendor or us. They can just go to public bid for everything. So that's the main thing that I see, Michael, is the reason for using a cooperative contract. Uh, it also allows for member entities that may have, especially like in Texas, California, New York, where they have one school district might have hundreds of buildings. And all these are tied to maybe one building automation system. So for them to be able to keep consistency and continuity with all their operating system within those facilities, being able to use the same vendors or same vendors that sell the same products to keep that continuity and efficiency within those buildings is huge for those people. If they go out to public bid, they might lose those benefits. So to me, especially from the larger districts, that's I always thought that was a huge uh, factor for the member entity to be able to use to help them. So
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, um, hopping back to Brandon here, those are great benefits and things like that, but kind of wanted to just put if you had to put some post-it notes or some caution flags out or something like that, what might be some of the most common mistakes that typically happen through this tips construction process?
I'm going to say probably it starts with probably some lump sum pricing, just trying to do one line item for the whole project. That's a huge setback and takes a lot of time to weed through that to get it back to
Hmm.
to an actual line item purchase. People typically will they can't find the item that they're looking for in RS means. A lot of times they'll go in and they'll modify the RS means line item estimate, that particular line, and change it to the pricing to benefit them or to fit more what they're doing, I guess, if
Hmm.
you will. That's to me, that's not allowed at all. We can't change that. It is what it is for a reason, and we have to go by it. And then a lot of times they'll adjust the unit cost. So if it's a lot of like just the other day, I had one that was square feet in RS means when they were trying to do it, another footage or different type of measurement.
Sure.
And like I said earlier, use the incorrect city cost index is another thing where they, use the national cost, or they won't, or if the project, or if they're from Dallas and the project's being procured in Houston, they'll try to use the Dallas one. They have to use where the city of cost index based off where the project's being
Hmm.
performed. We catch that some.
Yes.
Um, A lot of times they apply the wrong coefficients, or they don't apply the coefficient at all. That's something else we see some of, and you want to make sure you get the right coefficient put in. Um, you always have to reference, tips and obviously your tips contract number on your proposals and your purchase orders. Um, and that's, we have to go back sometimes and fix those. They'll grab their old contract number, so grabbing their new contract number. We see that on a daily, so we're used to that. And then and usually, a lot of times they'll use the non-pre-priced items without the documentation. I said we need the pricing for those items that are stuck in the Division 99. We always have to have that backup. So, um,
Right.
and sometimes they'll issue the purchase orders before a compliance review is done too. So a lot of times that's an issue. We have to, it triggers it into a different category at that point.
Absolutely. And that's something that leads into it next is, okay, so when should tips be notified by the agency? Because what we're doing is completing that verification to look for all those red flags, mistakes, whatever you want to call them. And on behalf of our agencies for free, we're looking into that, right? That's what makes us the subject matter experts in some ways to help do that. And just like you said, you do not need to be issuing the PO before this is done to all those member agencies out there. So, what time, like Brandon, we'll just continue with you. What time in the process should they be submitting this and following the PO procedure? And payment is still made payable to their vendors, and then maybe on an estimate or average, how long does that take to get back from tips if everything goes right?
Once they submit the proposal to us,
When should they submit the proposal? At what point, right? And then how about how long does it take to get back to them?
well, me personally, I like to see the member submit the proposal to our compliance at tipsconstruction.com email so that we can get it and we can verify all that, make sure everything's
Mhm.
in order, and the contract number is in place and all the
Yeah.
pricing has been verified. We send back an email at that point telling them how to move forward if they choose so, and it gives the tips PO address, email address, and once they submit it into there, then it comes to Gene and myself. And once we approve that, all the compliance reviews already pre-verified. It's already done. So once we get that in the system, then we basically just, we look at that email, we sent that, and we verify everything again, just to make sure we didn't miss anything. Then we submit that, for that to be processed, and then our internal team sends the vendor the purchase order at that point, and then work can begin, like you said, as normal.
Yeah. So let's say someone calls you in a panic and they're saying how fast can we do this? I've got a board meeting coming up or what have you, right? Uh what's the average turnaround that you'd recommend putting out there to the stratosphere, right? Of how long from when they send it into the tips PO team, what's your average turnaround to get that back?
Once we've verified it and we've given them direction to send it to TIPS PO, typically it's recorded within 2 days.
And again, once your vendor has pretty much finalized what they believe is going to be that final number that's going to match your PO volume, we can get that ahead of time and we can start verifying. And like we said at the beginning, some of these RS means quotes are for a quick and minor repair, and they're maybe 10 line items. There's some that are 40 pages long. So,
Unfortunately.
and we're going to do that, and we're going to look at it. And yes, there are things in place that help us expedite that process, softwares and
Right.
things like that,
When we
right?
don't own them, we don't
But
just look at those line items. We put those line items
exactly.
in our RS mean system, and we verify each line item that it's duplicating the same cost that they're getting. We do that
Mhm.
just to verify that for the member customer.
Exactly. We're building it back with the same software that they would use, and do those numbers match up we're verifying that it's not a false document. Again, nothing is ever done, I believe we could all say, maliciously, right? It's not anything that's going to be done on purpose to try to trick a public agency. That's never in the best interest of any vendor because they want repeat work, right? However, mistakes happen. We listed a list of mistakes that are bound to happen eventually at each individual level or all at once or whatever, right? A lot of things can go wrong. Procurement and construction is different than buying simple commodities, right? So that's why we take our time and we do it diligently. So that just takes man hours. I love, that 48-hour window, though. I think that's a great way to put out is if we can get it ahead of time and once you submit it to the official tips process, that can actually happen very quickly in preparation for a board meeting or a meeting
Right.
with the architect again or whatever you're doing. So no,
Absolutely.
that's great, guys. But we kind of need to start closing it out, I guess. So uh anything that we haven't touched on, Gene, that you might recommend, best practices or things to help ensure maybe a smooth and successful project outcome, anything that you might want to add towards those remarks?
One thing that comes to mind specifically for me, Michael, that Brandon and I deal with on a daily basis that affects members, entities, affects us, affects everyone, and that is them keeping their vendor profile updated with the correct contacts. I mean, we have POs sometimes that lay dormant because we can't get a hold of the right people to get information. I would say that is the hardest thing that we fight with daily. Uh, I mean, we can't get the PO to the right people. Then 3 weeks later, someone will call and say, "Well, hey, what about our PO?" And say, "Well, who are you?" Say, "Well, I took Fred's place." Well, Fred hadn't been here in a year. I said, "Well, no one told us." I said, "You've got an error on your quote that we need to fix, and before you get your PO, you've got to fix that." And the members already contacted us 3 times asking about it, and we can't get a hold of anybody at your company. And if it were me, that was one thing I would definitely want to keep track of and make sure of was that where my check is coming to, I want to make sure whoever's going to send me that check has my correct information
Yes.
there. So uh, as long as they keep that up to date, Michael, we can get in touch with them. We can train them. We can help them with all facets of what we talked about today. We can help them be better members for their customers or members. Helps us to be better at our job. It helps everyone. So if I had to give one piece of advice to a vendor entity today, at least, I would say keep your information up to date with us. So,
Yep. That ties back into the first thing we talked about on what's the first thing to do.
sure,
And that's communicate, communicate, communicate. So,
correct.
Exactly.
if you haven't updated a way to communicate, then we need to fix that, right?
Yeah,
And that's a major takeaway of today, and kind of our heart behind it, I guess we could say, is we're here collectively at Tips across all our departments, across all our roles to help procurement happen. Okay. We get that vendors are wanting to sell. We get that members are needing to buy. They've got a need, they got to get fixed or what have you. Okay. And so when it comes time to, I've always said it this way. Um, if there's a problem with tips and how you're using it, then you're doing it wrong. Right.
yeah,
Right.
It's
yeah,
meant to be simple. There's some learning curves, but it's
sure.
meant to be simple. It's meant to be a very streamlined process. And if you're running into problems, that's generally a sign that you're doing something wrong. So that's when you can reach out to us, whether it's a program manager like myself, whether it's Brandon and Gene in the RS means and Xactimate and the compliance department, right? But we're here to help educate, inform not just the public agencies, but the members as well on how to get this done and still meet all the needs that surround spending a public dollar. Brandon, are there any other takeaways that you'd want them to take from our conversations today, mostly around that job order contracting piece? Sure, you can add anything else you'd want to, but kind of in closing, what would you want them to leave with?
once again, you just always feel free to reach out to Gina or myself for any questions that they have, and we're here to help for sure. But always if you want to try to do it, make sure you put your tips contract number on there. You know, uh, on your proposal. That's to me, that's the biggest part. And we have to dig back. Make sure your contract number is your current contract number that you're listing. And like I said, just communicate with us, and we'll work with you. We're here to help in any way we can. Um, and we're 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 not here to cost you money. We're here to help you make money. So
Exactly. Right. Well, I want to thank both of you for coming again and sharing some introductory insights to the tips construction world. And I would say this, if you're still listening to us and you currently are not a member of TIPS, we service three main markets. That's education, government, and nonprofits. Any public agency of any sort, right? And to join is absolutely free. We would love to help you in your procurement needs and help make it personal, right? And if you're a vendor who would like to serve those agencies who join TIPS, that's very easy to do. You simply can register and respond to one of our competitively sealed bids to then hopefully be awarded to then hopefully serve those agencies. We want to thank you again for tuning in today to the Purchasing Made Personal podcast, and we'll see you next time.